When I claimed it and he saw that it was my essay, he was clearly disappointed, not to mention, surprised. But the important thing is he never spoke to me again the entire semester. That's how upset he was. Now, that would have been a lot for a young person who had not come from Dillard. But having come from Dillard, what did I care? I was prepared to make sure that I was judged appropriately. And if he had said that was an essay, then I would have been prepared to engage with him. But as long as he continued to give me A's, it didn't trouble me at all that he had nothing but contempt for me. This is what we want to give our children, the ability to understand who they are and how they perform, so that they're not constantly looking to other people to tell them whether they're good or not. They have to have that when we send them out, because they're going to have those kinds of reactions no matter where they go. So I think that learning, formal learning, trains us to do certain things. First of all, to follow a schedule of effort, to be guided by someone with more knowledge than we have. It's wonderful to acknowledge that we're not right all the time about everything. And having someone else assert that is very important. We develop discipline, which is essential to achieving success. We learn to work with other people. We develop self-confidence that relies on the greater understanding and knowledge that we've achieved, and we understand standards of rigor. I work with that every day in administration, people who come in and say, well, I'm doing a great job, and I deserve a salary increase. I see more people who are confident that they are outstanding. I'm disappointed to say that most often they're not. And so what I try to communicate to my students is, don't just seek approbation from people who are prepared to lie to you and tell you that you're really, really doing a fine job. Look for people who will criticize what you're doing and help you to grow. One of the worst experiences I had as a junior person coming along, I was at Princeton at the time as a dean of faculty, and I had responsibility for the salaries of the faculty that we hired. And so I did a spreadsheet and presented it on these faculty salaries. And when I gave it to my boss, he became infuriated. He said it was the worst piece of work he had ever seen in his life. In his life. And he was old. So he not only said it was horrible, to punctuate his opinion, he kicked the file cabinet. I was terrified because he was a particularly tall man with a really bushy shock of white hair. And so I was terrified. But in any case, so he sent me away. I, of course, went to my office and put my head on my desk and cried. Very important to be able to do that. And then I got up from there and I redid the spreadsheet. I always cite that because so often with minorities and women, people never ever tell you what they actually think you're doing wrong. They talk about it to other people, but they never tell you, because the impediment of difference somehow compels them to lie or just to omit certain things. And in the absence of the things that they could tell you, they're busy telling other people how they can improve. So I always say to my students, find the faculty member who's going to criticize you. Get used to that. Because if you do that, you're just gonna get better and better at what you do, okay? But if you are content to hear only praise, be prepared for lagging in terms of your advancement, because you're never going to know what they are actually thinking unless you give them permission to tell you what you're thinking. So I'm sorry that I'm just straying all over the place. So raise your hand when I've really gotten so far off. So I really advise my students to focus less on a particular course of study. I'm always impressed. People come to me and say, what do you do? Oh, I'm a mechanical engineer. But usually it's something much more precise than that, okay? And people are very proud when they are very, very focused and very narrow. So I should tell you that I tell my students, don't worry about your course of study. Worry more about the rigor with which they are prepared to engage in a variety of learning opportunities. The most common question to me about what I've done in my career is, why on earth did I major in French? And then I compounded that error by going on and getting a PhD in French. And then what does that have to do with what I've done in my career? So they saw my study of French as a liability that would surely not lead to any good result. So it's often not the particularity of the field of knowledge, it's more likely the breadth of understanding and the capacity that people can envision for our students over the long run. And so we have a lot of people who are narrowly trained and expert, but they tend to be kept in those positions for a very long time. The people who ascend are the people who are broad, okay? So whatever you do, young people, make sure you focus on that breadth. Again, people ask me why I studied French at Dillard. The reason is pretty simple. I thought languages would give me a singular opportunity to learn about the world. After all. My parents were very strict. And we could go maybe a couple of blocks to the east, a couple of blocks to the west and north and south, but we couldn't go beyond that. My parents, in my world as a child, I couldn't go to a dance. I couldn't do any of the conventional things that children growing up today can do. My parents were very strict. So naturally, as a young person going off to college, what did I want to do? I knew the world was about more than the few blocks around my neighborhood in Fifth Ward. And I was determined to learn more about that. And thanks to faculty at Dillard, especially Dr. Salcedo and Mrs. Ryan, they invited me into that world and made it possible for me to study in Mexico, the summer of my first year, and then in France. And doing so set me apart at a time when people really didn't have those kinds of opportunities. It is impossible to know where life will ultimately take us. Of course, growing up in a small town with no resources and on the margin of society, I couldn't imagine going to college, let alone becoming a college president. My family moved to Houston when I was 7, and it was pretty brutal. I looked and felt like a fish out of water. Children made fun of me and my sisters for the way we dressed, of course. We were the prototypical country bumpkins. For the longest time, because I was poor, I not only felt like an outsider, but I felt embarrassed every day that I went to school. And this is the horrible thing about the way we treat our children who lack resources. We not only point out to them the deficiencies they have, but we make them feel bad about the fact that they don't have money. That makes no sense whatsoever. Because your intellect is not a function of what is in your pocketbook. Your talent is not a function of how much money you have. And so these impediments to being able to see true merit in our young people is one of the greatest travesties of this society. So it's wonderful when institutions like Dillard and programs like the one that you have to raise money to support these children, it's wonderful that these things can exist, because there's so much in society that works against elevating these young people. I'm going to skip ahead. The day I was sworn in as president for the first time, I thought of my dear parents who for most of their lives had no civil rights and just an 8th grade education. I learned eventually that although highly educated, I could never be better than they were, because in spite of what they had endured, they had faithfully followed their beliefs and done their duty. Principal among those beliefs was that a person's worth is neither determined by the recognition they receive from others, nor granted by the possessions they amass. They believed worth was determined by character and by how we treat and care for others. Understanding the intrinsic value of every human life powered my rise through the academy and fueled my passion for helping young people. People often ask me why, after a long career and 2 presidencies, why did I accept the invitation to lead Prairie? The answer is simple. Certainly a lot simpler than most people expect. I was once a student, like those I serve today at Prairie. I was fortunate to happen upon someone who pointed me in the right direction to Dillard. What followed for me were decades of extraordinary opportunities that powered my rise to the top of higher education. So how could I possibly do less than what had been done for me? And that is why I give significantly to Prairie View and to other colleges and universities. I believe there's no more powerful investment than enabling young people to learn and to embrace the hopefulness that God makes possible for all of us. And in that vein, I want to let you know that whatever is raised today for scholarship, I will match, so that you can provide additional funds to Dillard. So again, I thank you for this invitation, and I hope you will remain devoted to the idea of helping other students who deserve the chance you got by going to Dillard. Thanks very much.